Welcome to Hockey Night in New York, where Islanders hockey always reigns supreme. Whether you were raised at the barn in Uniondale or born in the stable at Belmont, Hockey Night in New York is your home for all things Isles. Now, let's drop the puck and get this party started.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is Hockey Night in New York. Welcome to the program, everyone. It is Sunday, April 26, 2026. Coming at you live from Floored Media here in Rockville Center. Have an absolutely magnificent show coming up for you tonight. That's right. My name is Sean Cuthbert. With me, as always, is Mr. Arthur Staple. Arthur, how do you do, sir?
I'm doing great. Got a little goofy in here in the studio before this show.
A little bit.
I think we're all full energy now.
Yeah, we are
for the
ready.
Season in review.
We're ready to go. We're going to talk about the season that was, but before we do, I want to send out a big thanks to Razor Kniff and Launstein, attorneys at law, ready to fight for you. Check them out at razorandkniff.com, at RAISERANDKENNIFF.com for a free consultation. And if you're hanging out with us live in the chat, folks, and you want to get your questions in for later, just type in Questions Brewing, followed by the question you would like to ask us. And we will get to that later on in the show. So, Arthur Staple, let's talk about the 2025-26 New York Islanders, a squad that bamboozled us, hoodwinked us a bit, I would say. I think that's a fair way to put it because, listen, good vibes for, what do you say, like at least 75% of the season?
Sure.
Right?
Give you that.
Yeah, and then they just hit a cliff and it went all downhill, and we're gonna talk about all of that. So I'm gonna rattle off some numbers here, as we do here on the show sometimes. 43, 34, and 5, 91 points, 6th in the Metro, 12th in the East. And before the season, you might have said, yeah, I could see that, probably. And then the season started after they opened 0-3, and they basically said, hold on a second, guys, we're a little bit better than you thought. And they have an excellent season again for about 3 quarters worth. And it goes south, 10-0 in overtime, 4-5 in shootouts. They had 15 sixth attacker goals. That was the most in the league, but all for naught because it didn't even result in a playoff berth. 25th in goals for, 2.79 per game. 5th in goals against, 2.88. The power play, once again, dreadful at 16.5%, good for 30th overall in the league. The PK, though, 10th overall, 80.8. So that was a bright spot. And for me, Arthur, the good vibes lasted through essentially St. Patrick's Day. That was a 3-1 win over Toronto. And then on the 19th was that game against Ottawa. This is when they were on their little Ontario or Northern Canada, road trip, right? Eastern Canada road trip. And they took care of Toronto because they're not a very good hockey team. But then they went into Ottawa, and it looked like they were going to come away with at least a point. And with 11.1 seconds to go, Brady Tkachuk said, no, sir, you're going to have no points tonight. And from that point on, that is when the wheels fell off the bus here. 4-10-0 after that for the rest of the season. 1-7, of course, in their final 8. And I don't know if that game or the way that game ended is the reason why. Like they all, went into this mental collapse that they couldn't recover from. But it is, for me, kind of the pinpoint there where everything went south after all those good vibes in the season.
Yeah, that's a big encapsulation by you.
Thank you.
I think you're right. I kind of expanded out a little bit. I really feel like after the Olympic break, they came out and they won their first 3 out of the Olympic break, 2 in overtime, and then the kind of back and forth game against Florida that they won, I think 5-4. So you're thinking, all right, they're whatever. I think they were 34, 21-5, 22 games left at that point, and you think, okay, they're not playing their best, but they are figuring out ways to win, which is what good teams do. They'll right the ship. And to me, defensively, they were never able to do it. And obviously that part encapsulates the trade deadline. They'd already gotten Carson Soucy. They already gotten Andre Palat before the break. Then they had Braden Shen on deadline day. And everybody has mixed reactions to that. That's probably the most
one way to put
most generous way I can say it.
Okay.
But they still look like a team that could get to the playoffs and make some noise because of the goaltending, because of Matthew Schaefer, because they still seem to have that Islander DNA from good years of scoring timely goals. Offense wasn't completely the issue. The power play was bad, but they still knew how to score goals. And certainly after the break, their offense was actually quite good. But the way that they defended, not just those last 14 games, not just the end of that game against Ottawa, but some of those games where they would go one terrible game and one decent game, kind of alternating depending on who they were playing there for a little bit before the wheels completely came off. There were some signs. There were some real signs that, and maybe you're right, maybe it was that Brady Tkachuk goal, which kind of came out of nowhere. You probably thought everybody's just playing for overtime. We see a lot of 3-point games. They'll try to figure it out like they have all season in overtime. And that was the one that kind of, I think you're right. I think it kind of shocked this group, and they were never able to get over the shock. And then, they get the lead on Pittsburgh in the second period, a 3-1 lead, which I understand they're not the old Barry Trotz DNA Islanders, but you got to be able to hold on to a team that's reeling like Pittsburgh that wasn't completely assured of a playoff spot, and the wheels fall off in that game. And then, obviously the low point, I would say, those back-to-back games, but right before Patrick Roy was fired, the loss to Philly where they come out flat, the loss in Carolina where they come out even flatter. Just some of the in-game numbers from both of those. What was it? 12-0 shots for Philly at the start of that game.
Yes.
32-6 shots for Carolina midway through the third period of a 1-goal game, no less.
Right.
You can feel disappointed. And as we watch the playoffs, and you and I text occasionally, and my other Islander fan friends, this year to miss the playoffs, to not be in the spot that Philly's in, to play a Pittsburgh team that is beatable, to not be in even one of those wild card spots. I know what Carolina did to Ottawa, but you see what Buffalo's doing to Boston. The Islanders are, it's not even an argument. The Islanders are better than those teams. They would They would play better. They have better goaltending. They have timelier scoring. I understand you can make the argument they didn't play well enough over those last 22 games to deserve it.
Yeah,
and they didn't. But it still stings. It stings a lot to see that they're not there, and this was a year where anybody who got into those last few spots could have done some real damage.
Well, Arthur, let's put this team on the line, presented by Razor, Kniff, and Lonstein. They won 9 of 12 leading into that Ottawa game.
Yeah.
So while you're right, after they came out of the Olympic break, things were a little off. But it really wasn't until that last collection of 15 or so games where, again, I'm not even saying that necessarily the end to that Ottawa game broke their brains and they just couldn't recover from it. But it's just a very good pinpoint to say, hey, this is where things changed here. But I think the question is, when you look at this team, clearly flawed team, and we're going to get into those flaws a little bit deeper later on, but was this a collapse due to lack of talent, coaching, fatigue, a combination of all that? Because I think that's what just has everybody grasping for answers here, is because and I use the bamboozled and hoodwinked example because they had us all feeling good, right? I mean, they had everybody feeling good to the point where you look at the last stretch of the schedule, they're home for 10 of 12, right? Some of the competition tougher than others, but you thought to yourself, hey, they can go at least 500 here, easy. And that'll probably still coast them into a spot, even if it's on the last day or even if it's a close call, right? But it just looked so good for so long, and it was just such a dramatic fall from grace where you're like, what the hell happened to these guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing for me was, you want to say fatigue. It's Ilya Sorokin's fatigue, and we've seen it before. We've seen it the year that Lane Lambert was fired, kind of the run-up to his being fired that December, where you play Ilya Sorokin 10, 11, 12 games in a row because you have to, because you need to win games. And then Patrick Roy comes in, they get a good enough boost, they make the playoffs, but Ilya Sorokin isn't playing well in the playoffs because he's probably fatigued. And then we see it again this year. Not just in the run-up to Patrick Roy being fired to the end of the season, but really for that entire last month of the season, they couldn't use David Riddick, their backup. He just wasn't reliable enough. And I think Ilya Sorokin, we've now pretty much had it confirmed. And I understand that, the Islanders as a team kind of frittered away the chance for Ilya Sorokin to win a Vezina. And he also seemed to break down quite a bit in those last 15 games or so that he played, almost all of. But I think we've now had it pretty much confirmed for us, Ilya Sorokin at age 30, he is not a 15-start-in-a-row goaltender. And maybe that knocks him down a peg from the Vasilevskis and the Shesterkins and the guys that are perennial, the Hellebucks, the guys that can really step up and carry a load and not be affected by it. I think maybe we've seen it now too often, and maybe it's coaching staff, front office need to be a little bit smarter about how they assemble their goalie room and how they proceed going forward. But the desperation to need him to play every single game to get in the playoffs, it's happened 3-4 out of the last 5 years,
right?
And it just doesn't work. So we see him break down, and I think one of the things that maybe we tricked ourselves into believing throughout the season with all those good vibes was that his play, where he was playing at such a high level for, like you said, 75% of the season, that the players maybe were tricked a little bit too into thinking he will bail us out. Our defense doesn't have to be better.
Right.
He'll make the saves and we'll score the key goal here, or we'll score the one in overtime to get us the extra point. And I think when he started to falter, nobody had an answer. They showed it a little bit. You think back to the Columbus game that they won, 1-0, and then the low scoring win that they had over Dallas, depleted Dallas team, but still a very good team. And you say, okay, they were able to do those. Well, what happened? What was the 8-3 Penguins loss? What was the Philly game? I think, and we'll certainly get into it more. And I've said it a couple times here in the last few weeks. This is why I'm so firmly convinced that the core of this team needs to change. And it's not familiarity. It's not that they're all old. It just feels like collectively they are not able to play the way that they need to play to be successful in front of a top 5 goalie in the league. Because no matter how good he is, we can look and see the Rangers collapse, and Igor Shesterkin had pretty good underlying numbers this season, despite the Rangers being bad from day one.
Right.
Connor Hellebuck, last 2 Vezinas, he doesn't play at that super high level. He drops down 10%, 20%. Winnipeg's not even close to a playoff spot.
Right.
So you can have that elite goalie, but you need a whole team. And I think the Islanders never developed that mentality of we got to do our part here defensively too.
And I think you raised that point, and it made me think a little further on it. And the Islanders had been spoiled by good tandems for a while. You want to go back to Halak Grice, Leonard Grice, Varlamov Grice, Sorokin Varlamov.
Sure.
Varlamov gets hurt. And that's been something that's been missing since, right? Hogberg didn't work out. That experiment failed. It looked good this year at first with Riddick, and then that sputtered out, unfortunately. And when now we very clearly know that Ilya Sorokin can only handle so much of a workload, especially with a team in front of him that gives up a hell of a lot of chances.
Yep.
And because maybe he's not so fatigued if the team in front of him actually performs better defensively, right? Because you talk about all the high danger chances they face, right? 5-on-5. I think they led the league, or they were second in the league in 5-on-5 high danger chances. So clearly the team in front of him isn't making his job any easier either. But one thing they haven't been able to fall back on now in the last couple of seasons is having that, steady backup where when you can have confidence, you can have faith, because Patrick Waugh very clearly said to himself, all right, David Riddick, you were good for a spell here, but you're not showing us what we need you to show us here in the stretch. And these are the most important games. So it was like, Ilya, get the hell out there. And we saw what happened with that. And, we're going to talk about the summer later on, but that's something that probably needs to be addressed, especially now it's very clear where we have multiple examples now where Ilya Sorokin isn't a guy, at least with this defense in front of him, that can handle the workload that he's getting. Yeah.
I think the trend now in the league, and I think these things are cyclical too. Like next year, we could be looking at Sorokin could be up for another Vezina. We could see some of those other guys I mentioned that have won Vezinas before. They could be leading their teams again.
Right.
But you look at the elite teams right now. Colorado, Scott Wedgwood's playing right now. This guy's been a backup for over 10 years in the league. They have kind of a 1A, 1B setting. Buffalo turns to Alex Lyon when Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen doesn't do it quite as well as he'd played. All of a sudden, Alex Lyon, a career backup, he's playing great now for Buffalo on the verge of advancing. You look at Montreal, another team that everybody's kind of hot on because they're playing so well. Jakob Dobish has come in. They had, Sam Montembeau was going to be Canada's backup.
Right, yeah.
This guy's not even barely even in the league anymore.
Right,
so
right.
I think these allegiances and putting your goalie up as this is the best guy on our team, it's good, but you cannot rely on that. You cannot say, let's get a Marty Brodeur, let's get a guy who can play 60-plus games and then give us 2 or 3 or 4 playoff rounds. The game has just changed too much for that to be the case. So, when we get into kind of looking ahead to this offseason, and I talk about a lot of changes, David Riddick seems like a great guy. There's a reason he's bounced around a lot. I just think the consistency is not there, and you need to find whether it's a third guy. We saw Semyon Varlamov play a couple of games in Bridgeport, which is an incredible comeback for him after almost 2 full years away.
Absolutely. Amazing.
But double knee replacements at his age, is he going to be able to be a guy? Maybe. He's still got another year left, and they're obviously not going to be able to do anything with that contract.
Right.
So if you can find a third guy who's viable and the cap is going up, and you can keep, maybe don't do it from the start of the season, but you have 3 guys available to you later in the season, maybe that's a way to do it. But I assume there will be. Matthew Darche and his front office, smart group, they got to figure out a way to keep Ilya Sorokin healthy and energetic for the stretch run, because unless the Islanders make a lot of changes or they have a much better start to the season where they don't have to worry about the last 20 games, it feels like they might be in the same spot again.
And you raised the Varlamov situation, and like that could almost be something that hurts this team in the sense that, he's healthy enough to be back, but not healthy enough to play. And then all of a sudden you can't throw that contract onto LTIR. Yeah. And that creates just another issue with the salary structure, right?
So it's another impetus for getting some of these longer term deals off the cap, even with the cap going up as much as it's going up.
So let's shift gears a little bit here. Let's talk about the power play, or the lack of power.
Do we have to?
We're here. We got to do it. It's the eulogy. So here's a funny nugget about the power play. It actually improved from last year. That's right. It went from 12.6% last season to 16.5%. But again, still 30th overall. And look, we all have eyes. We saw it for 82 games this season. It is still a big, big problem. They allowed 9 shorthanded goals.
Also a problem.
And to butcher a quote from Bo Horvat on exit day, he basically said there was too much perimeter play. And you and I have touched on that. Like, it's very deliberate, and you kind of already know what's coming or what's not coming. Right. And this is something that really has to change. And I think also, we've joked about it, but like clearly the assistant coaches are not the problem, because they've cycled through enough now.
It is not your fault, Scott Gomez, wherever you are, if you're watching Gomer.
For Scott Gomez and whoever came after. But clearly this is on, to me now, sure, could strategy still have something to do with it? Could Patrick Waugh still had something to do with it, right? Because at the end of the day, as you said on the show, it all ends with him, right? As far as the strategy goes, right? So maybe they were too stubborn with what they were doing. They weren't willing to change it, or whatever changes they didn't make, it just did not work out, right? But you still have talented players on this team. Matt Barzal, Matt Schaefer, Bo Horvat, Cal Ritchie getting time on there, right? Simon Holmstrom seeing some time there. Carl Palmieri will probably be back when he's healthy, right? You have names that can put pucks in the net and that can make plays and have at least a mediocre power play. That's all we're asking for here. I mean, because a mediocre power play last season and this probably is one of the huge differences between getting over the finish line or not to make the playoffs, right? So What do they have to do here, Arthur? What's going on?
Well, I don't want to dive right into roster construction like we did before, but I think I pointed it out a few weeks ago. Going back to 2018, at the year after Matthew Barzal won the Calder, when they had his rookie year, when they had Barzal and Anders Lee was a 40-goal scorer, and Tavares was here. They had one of the best power plays in the league that year. They couldn't do anything else right, but that was one of the highlights.
Right.
Since 2018 to now, they are 30th in composite power play. Only Anaheim and Philly are worse. And those 3 are consistently in the bottom, as you see year after year. And since 2018, this is Anaheim's first trip to the playoffs, I believe, in a full year since 2018. Philly, first time in the playoffs since they played in the bubble against the Islanders. You can only do so much to overcome a terrible power play, especially when you are a team, as a bad power play usually indicates an offense that's, you're not going to have an elite 5-on-5 offense in a terrible power play unless you're this year's Avalanche, but that's a different story. I just feel like, do they have the personnel? It's been such a long-running failure. I do wonder if they have the personnel. I wonder if, whether it's Scott Gomez or John McClain or now Ray Bennett, someone who's been running this power play saying, I don't think you're giving me the right tools here.
Yeah.
And I think there is a factor, and, fans in the chat have asked about it. There is a factor of who is the guy with the puck the most, and is he a predictable guy? And predictable doesn't mean somebody whose passes are easily picked off. It's someone who his teammates know what he's going to do. That what you're practicing is what you put on the ice in a game. And I think Matthew Schaefer can be that guy, but I think there's been times this year where he's deferred a little too much when he's on the ice with Matthew Barzal.
Yeah.
And we even saw it a few games where they took Matthew Barzal off that top unit, or whatever you call it. And
Right.
Patrick Waugh comes out and says like, it's not 1 and 2, it's whatever. They're the same, and it's like, I don't buy that.
Right.
I think if Matthew Schaefer going into the season where you know what you have in Matthew Schaefer, and to be fair to Patrick Waugh, excuse me, they didn't know what they had in Matthew Schaefer in training camp, so you can't put that much on his plate right away. Now you do.
Right.
And I think going into next season, whether it's Ray Bennett, if he stays under Peter DeBoer, whatever the game planning is, you say to your team, Matthew Schaefer is our power play quarterback, and everything runs through him. And I think the predictability factor will go up for the other guys, whoever they are, and the percentages will go up. And like you said, if it's 18 or 19%, that's playoffs.
Yeah.
That's the difference between missing and making. That's enough goals to win games. So, again, another, like the backup goalie, if we're talking about it, I think they know about it. So it's a priority. And I do wonder, and again, we'll get into this later, I do wonder what this means for what Matthew Barzal means to this team going forward. If he's not the guy that has the puck all the time, do you need to have him, or can you upgrade in a lot of different areas by moving him?
For sure. So let's talk about the trade deadline, because that was a very significant point in this Islanders season, right? And, it was a mix. Like, let's look at it from the vantage point of before everything came after, right? Leading into it, right? I feel like it was a mixed bag. Like, there were some head scratchers, we've talked about it at length here, the age of Schenn, the contract, Palat as well. And I think, at least for me, there was some, giving the benefit of the doubt that Darche had a relationship with Palat. We obviously know what he did in Tampa when he was, more in his prime, right? And you're like, okay, this is a guy who he has Stanley Cup pedigree. Maybe he's great in the locker room. He can help, maybe in a more of a minimal way, but not a guy who you really think is going to hurt the team, at least to start, right? And same with Carson Soucy. We said the same thing, right? You know what? They needed some depth. They needed to plug the defense a little bit. And I don't think we foresaw how that was going to go when he was paired with Mayfield and all that, right? So, even if you weren't necessarily convinced that it was a great deadline, and also bringing back Pajot, by the way, which kind of lumps onto this, right? But here's one thing I do want to say, because Brayden Schenn, he had 11 points in 19 games.
Yeah, he wasn't bad.
He wasn't bad. He was actually pretty fine. I know some of his advanced metrics weren't great, but at the end of the day, he produced.
Nobody's were. So to be fair,
fair effing point there, Arthur. But here's one thing I do want to say, right? Like how every now and then, where you hear about a trade that wasn't. Like, you hear the details of a trade. Right? Now, let's look at this Brayden Schenn trade for a second now. Let's say that trade doesn't happen, but it comes out that the Islanders had a deal on the table for Brayden Schenn, or maybe he just rejected it, right? Maybe he doesn't say, I'll go, right? And we find out that the Islanders were going to trade the Colorado first pick, Gamson, the goaltending prospect, Jonathan Drouin going the other way for salary purposes. Whatever that trade was, how many people would have been like, oh, man, I wish that went through. I wish that happened, right? Like I just feel like most people would just be like, oh, all right, fair enough. Or maybe someone would even been like, oh, I'm glad that didn't happen, because they saw he was 34, 35, whatever it is. And they saw, 3 years at $6.5 million. And that's how I look at it now, where it's like, I don't know. Like, I know why Matthew Darche did it. And again, like, I was like, I get it, man, because if they do get into the playoffs, he will help. I think he would have helped. And we saw hints of that in the games that he played. But just looking back at it, like, I just don't think it's a deal that, like, they had to make. And we made the argument here that draft pick that they gave up could have been better used, especially now, this summer, having that, extra, bullet in the chamber to potentially upgrade this team or unload the salary that we're talking about, right?
Yeah. And I feel like the effect on this season's team was negligible, right? Like, obviously Brayden Schenn came in and they didn't get any better.
No,
they arguably got worse, not necessarily because of him and because of that trade.
Right.
And I think what you can say about those deals is they highlighted the fact that this is a very flawed group. They were not a group that was saying, all right, we just need a couple of guys who have won before. We need a couple of guys with cups in this room, and that'll put us over the edge. It was already a very veteran team. It was already a fairly slow team. You bring in 3 more slow guys. That's the biggest criticism I think you can make. When you see Carson Soucy playing the way that he's playing, I think if Carson Soucy goes to Colorado, he's going to be fine in that team. I think if he's on it, he is a guy that if you are highlighting his flaws as a 16-minute-a-night guy, you are highlighting the flaws of the team this group of defenders, not just saying, I can't believe Carson Soucy, a total journeyman in this league, couldn't save us defensively.
Right. And he single-handedly brought the Islanders down, right?
He is a fit-in piece.
Right.
Braden Shen is different. That is a trade for now and for the future, and you can certainly question that as much as, to me, that trade is two separate trades, too. It's you're paying the third to unload Drouin's contract, which certainly I think was welcome from people, and then it's Shen, and I think it's Marcus Giedloff, the other goalie prospect, not Gamson. That goes. It's okay. That goes for a first, and I understand that first is in all likelihood going to be 31st, maybe even 32nd. And yes, hindsight is great to say if you had that first, you maybe don't make that pick, but you can make a trade in the summer when things are a little bit looser and everybody's sort of figured out their lineup. It also highlights that nobody who traded a first-round pick at the deadline seemed to really get a lot of value back for it. You look at Detroit trading an unprotected first for Justin Falk to the same St. Louis Blues.
Right.
And Detroit finished even further out of it than, I guess they finished right around when the Islanders did. But point being, they didn't trade a pick that's a lottery pick for a guy who's basically on an expiring deal. Yeah. So it just was not a great deadline if you had a pick like that. That doesn't mean you had to make that trade, and obviously we didn't know we didn't know they were going to fall down completely and fall apart. But I think you can justify having Braden Shen in this lineup if you have guys that push him into the right spot. I don't think he's a second line guy anymore. Right. I think he's a third line guy. So then you can make the argument, why are you extending J.G. Pageau? I understand Pageau's going to be a center. If you keep everybody, then Shen's probably a winger. To my mind, if you keep everybody in that forward group, I don't understand what you're doing.
There's a long list of guys that you could say, oh yeah, third line.
Right. They have a lot of third and fourth liners in this forward group when playing on a good team. So I just think Palat too is a guy. He's a complimentary guy. And he was bad. There's no sugarcoating that. And I think you have to figure out a way to not have him be on this roster next season. Right. 100%. But adding those two guys when they added them, and the team was still playing pretty well when they added both of them. There was
logic.
It just is more, it's more reflective to me of the flaws of the core of this team and how much that needs to change rather than Matthew Darche screwed up royally by getting these guys. That's the way I look at it now that the season is over.
Yeah, I don't think that deadline is what tanked this season for the Islanders.
No, the roster's
there was logic, even if you didn't agree with all of it. Like, you could see it, and it very well could have gone the other way, and you'd say, oh yeah, okay, so these guys helped them get across the finish line, right? And we know that that's what the intention was, but unfortunately, in hindsight, they fell flat in their face with it. Like, it just failed. It just did not work out. It didn't do what they hoped that it would do. And if maybe there's some lessons to be learned from Matthew Darche in this, and we'll see how, with his tenure here at the Islanders and stuff like that. But it just didn't work out. And unfortunately, it just helped to amplify how disappointing this season ended, because you can't even look back on that now in a positive light unless you like what Shen did and what he, I suppose, could still do. But, you gave up what you gave up for that, and it just didn't work out a whole lot. And, we're going to be very soon on this show talking about what the Islanders might do this summer, and you have one asset gone in a failed, trade deadline. So it's unfortunate, but, it's certainly something you have to look at with the way, things closed on this season. And so as we continue to build towards, where they're going to go this summer, let's focus in on two very important players in this team, and that's Matt Barzal and Bo Horvat. They are essentially the leaders of the offense on this team, right? I'll rattle off some numbers again. Matt Barzal, 19 goals, 53 assists, good for 72 points in 81 games. Horvat, of course, only played 57 games because he had some injury issues. 31 goals still, 26 assists for 57 points in 68 games. And, when the season got tight towards the end, when they were trying to battle it out for for this playoff spot that they didn't get, that's when the offense dried up, and that was two guys that you're going to look to be very important there, and it really wasn't there for them. You wonder how much the injuries might have affected Bo Horvat. But at the end of the day, it wasn't enough. So, I mean, in my opinion, I think, you probably feel similarly, but these are both very good players. They can help any team in this league. I enjoy watching them both as New York Islanders, but I don't think it's enough. I think they need help.
Yeah. It was interesting to me, too, to hear Peter DeBoer, and I understand that, he didn't sign anything in writing or anything like that, but saying that he sees Barzal as a center, and he did play him at center with Shen and Richie on his wings those last few games that DeBoer coached. I look at this lineup and I say, okay, if your top two centers are Bo Horvat and Matthew Barzal, you got to change a lot on the wings to make this a top six that's a viable top six that's going to scare any other opponents.
Right.
And I don't know how you do that. There's a lot of reasons in my mind that lead me back to Matthew Barzal is the most viable trade candidate among the star players. And one of the main ones is he is a playmaker. Who is he making plays for? Is he going to play with Braden Shen and Cal Ritchie next year? Like Cal Ritchie, he is going to be a very good player. He is a 40 to 50 point guy. Braden Shen is a 40 to 50 point guy. So if your power play still stinks, where is Matthew Barzal going to be distributing this puck to? Matthew Schaefer, they're going to be on the ice together all the time because Matthew Schaefer is their best goal-scoring option out of the guys that might be on the ice with them.
Exactly.
So if you are separating Horvat and Barzal, that to me says, okay, then you're making another trade that doesn't involve either of those guys to bring in a Jordan Kyrou or a Brock Besser or somebody that can put the puck in the net with one of these guys.
Right.
So it's curious to me to see, and he did also say, DeBoer, that he sees Cal Ritchie as a center too.
Right.
So
a lot of centers.
I don't know. I guess you can play 6 lines, but you might not have
That's
a lot
unorthodox.
You might not have a lot of wingers to go with him.
Right.
So yeah, I think those two guys to me work better together than they do apart. And I understand that you can mix and match and do however you want to do it.
Yeah.
But when I look at their group, even if you have Barzal on the wing, their strength is still down the middle. You have 6 viable centers, guys you can mix and match. The main issue for me is when you put a lot of these guys on the wing, unless you're going to see huge jumps from guys like Emil Heineman and Simon Holmstrom in terms of production. Where are these guys going to get the pucks to that's going to make this an offense worth watching, worth scaring other teams? It's a strange situation they're in, and I understand with all these other guys that are older and have term, you can try to figure that out, and whether it's Duclair or Palat or even a Casey Cizikas, if you're trying to spend your whole offseason trying to offload these guys, and you say, okay, the rest of it is fine, like I can't agree with that assessment. I really can't. I think they need a fundamental change in the way that they commit to offense, and I think it starts with some newer personnel.
I am with you, and we're going to build up towards talking about that newer personnel. But Arthur, before we break, why don't you give us your anthem of the season?
Of the season.
Yes.
Well, we are really dogging the group here today. Getting
Fair
it all
and
out,
balanced.
Getting it all out. But to me, I went all the way back in the catalog to probably my favorite band from when I was a teenager, The Jam.
Right.
The Jam, one of the great English punk bands of the 70s and 80s.
Great name.
And a song called When You're Young, just about the excitement of being young. And we are here experiencing the Matthew Schaefer youth experience, which was awesome. And
yes.
I don't want to ever lose sight of that, how exciting it was.
For sure.
Seeing what he did, exciting for the fans, exciting for his teammates, exciting to have him here. And Matthew Darche is not a young guy, but he is a young GM, and we're still waiting to see what he's going to do with a true offseason. So it just, everything feels kind of new, young, exciting. It feels weird to say that with a group that's kind of aging and frustrating the hell out of us. But that's my season wrap-up anthem.
I love it, and I know we've been doing a lot of lamenting, but like there were positive and exciting things, and Matthew Schaefer, of course, was at the top of that. Ilya Sorokin had for the majority of the year a good year, so there were definitely some good things that came out. Cal Ritchie as well. We'll touch on that stuff, but I love the anthem. Great stuff. And folks, that will do it for On the Line, presented by Razor, Kniff, and Lonstein Attorneys at Law, ready to fight when your good name is on the line. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to keep the train rolling here.
Attention all artists, storytellers, and creators of all kinds. It's time to make your content stand out above the rest. And Floored Media is the place to make your visions become a reality. Maybe you want to elevate your podcast and add some video, or turn that novel you wrote into an audiobook. Or maybe you just need the right space to produce your daily vlog. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, Floored Media has the professional facilities, exceptional staff, and intimate atmosphere to breathe life into your creative passions at every step of the process.
Hope you enjoyed the ads. Now let's get back to Hockey Night in New York.
That's right, folks. Let's get back to Hockey Night in New York. We are bouncing around the segments tonight, and we are going into Hero of the Season right now. We're going to talk about some folks that, despite the folly at the end, had some very sharp seasons for the New York Islanders. So, Arthur Staple, take it away, man.
I hate to be obvious, Sean, but got to go with Matthew Schaefer.
Of course.
Kid's not even 19 years old.
No.
Wowed all of us. He's going to be at the awards show in a few weeks, hoisting that Calder Trophy.
Mm-hmm.
A no-doubter season for him, and it was exciting to watch. You know, tying the rookie goal scoring record for defenseman, second leading scorer on the team, which is wild.
Yes.
And the sky's the limit. You know, I do wonder about what the team's going to look like around him, but I don't wonder about what he's going to do. I think the next step for him next season is taking control of this terrible power play, being a guy who's maybe a little bit tougher defensively without the puck, a little less gambling. It seemed like everyone else who got a little fatigued and faltered down the stretch, he was not immune to that either. But, you know, when you see a guy that age who can play 30, 35 minutes a night, you just kind of sit back and enjoy it. And we certainly enjoyed watching him play this year.
No doubt, Arthur. 23 goals, as you said, 36 assists, 59 points in 82 games played. He broke essentially every record there was to break as an 18-year-old rookie defenseman. Pretty damn impressive. Drove play, drew penalties, 38, and he munched massive minutes. This is a true franchise defenseman, Arthur, and it's been a very long time since the New York Islanders had one of those. So that is pretty awesome to say. So well done with Matthew Schaefer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So moving on now, it very easily could have been the same for me. I could have went with Matthew Schaefer as well, because let's face it, this guy definitely stole the limelight for the New York Islanders. But when you look at this season before the late collapse, if you will, there was one other fellow who we used to always cite being a reason for this team doing so well and being in a playoff spot for as long as they were, and that is goaltender Ilya Sorokin. Great, sputtered at the end. We already covered how and why, but this is a guy who would have been up for at least a nomination for a Vezina Trophy had they made the playoffs. That is without a doubt. Started off a little slow, but then they made the goalie coaching change, and that seemed to just spark his resurgence, right? And he was just absolutely phenomenal. We talked about the fact that the defense in front of him gave up a hell of a lot of high danger chances. So despite all of that, he still performed just so well. And, you know, gave this fan base a reason to believe in this team this season, you know? And him along with Schaefer, they both did a great job until, it just time ran out on him, I guess.
Yeah, you think you can criticize him surely for the end of the season, and I think there's plenty of fans that are feeling like, well, why can't we have a guy that makes 12 starts in a row? Mm-hmm. But you also say if he didn't do what he did the first 3 quarters of the season, then they would have been down with the Rangers for the entire year. So this is a guy who, Vezina, if they had stayed in that race for second, if they finished with 100 points, he would have been on a lot of Hart Trophy ballots too, I would imagine.
Agreed.
His goals saved above expectation numbers were better, even with the faltering at the end of the season. I think it was over 25 goals saved above expectation. Connor Hellebuck won the Hart last year with 21. So this was still a really elite season from Sorokin. He's had a couple like this now in the last 5 years since he became the number 1 goalie. The one thing that's missing is team success. Now that we've seen in these years that he's played really well, and he is 30. You'd like to see it happen at some point, but yeah, the way that he played the first 3-4 months of the season was lights out.
Yeah, so he ends the season 29-24-2, 2.68 goals against, and a 906 save percentage. And if not for some of those rough games towards the end, those numbers probably would have looked a little bit better. But look, you have a franchise defenseman, you have a cornerstone goaltender here. They have parts to turn this conversation around into some more optimism. So with that will do it for Hero of the Week. But Arthur, let's now talk about the youth movement that's happening with this team now. And obviously it starts with number 48, Matthew Schaefer. But we touched a little bit on Cal Ritchie. He's a guy who we can talk about a little bit more here. I still group in a guy like Simon Holmstrom. Sure. He's still a young dude. HNiNY, this is a guy who put up 21 goals. Now, obviously, he slowed down a little bit towards the latter half of the season, but another younger guy, another guy that hopefully they can build around with this core here. You have Eklund getting in that 82nd game. He looks like he might be a little further along than we thought. Hopefully, he can contribute next year. And it feels like anytime I see some Barry Colts highlights, that Kashawn Aitchison is just lighting that place up, and he's still doing it in the playoffs, so that's very encouraging. And you almost forget about Cole Eiserman as well. We're still wondering what he's going to do. He joined Bridgeport as well. He put up points down there. Yeah. We didn't get to Bridgeport yet. We wanted to know that as well.
We don't want to keep depressing ourselves.
Right,
but yeah.
For real. But you have a good collection of guys here, and that's even forgetting about the Nelsons of the world, right? And the Finleys of the world, who just signed his 2-year entry-level contract, right? So they have a cupboard, and for a very long time they didn't. And now the hope is you just got to see if these guys pan out. And you don't know until they do play a good stretch of games here in the NHL, because, look, I will never forget thinking about the Oliver Wallstroms of the past and the Michael Del Coles of the past, and on and on and on down the line. And hopefully this time around, these guys can be cultivated into contributors to this team, and you can kind of shake off the disappointment of this season and hopefully shake off some of the age around this team. And this can be the next generation of Islanders to lead towards some success here.
Yeah, for sure. I think Eklund, probably in the short term, the most exciting one. And a guy you didn't even mention, Isaiah George, who had a kind of an injury-plagued season after we saw some really good flashes 2 years ago. You know, if there's a chance to change that defense core that half of which has been here for a very long time, I think you if you can free up a spot on the left side behind Schaefer, maybe behind Alex Romanoff, that probably means trading Adam Pelech. But Isaiah George, I think with a full training camp and some confidence, he can get right back to that level that he showed as a 20-year-old a couple of years ago. I think you can't forget about these guys even when they have injury-plagued seasons. So they're in an interesting spot as far as that cupboard being very full, and obviously this first-round pick, sits at 13 right now. If they win the lottery again, they can move up as high as 3.
Right.
But you add to that, and then I don't see them moving any of these guys for immediate help. It's why I keep harping on they've got to take some pieces off of that NHL roster. You can't really just run out the clock on the term on some of these contracts. And then when those guys move in, if Victor Eklund is ready next fall, he goes in the lineup. Like, you have to make that a priority to find a spot for him to play in the NHL. And if it means trading somebody that we all really like and have seen play here for a long time, well, too bad. That's how you progress as an organization to get to the point of, like a Montreal now or like a Buffalo, you kind of mix and match and let those guys grow. So I think that's another reason to change a lot of the core, as much of it as you can this offseason. No guarantees with a young guy like Eklund, or even a young guy like Isaiah George or Eiserman, maybe, who's a little bit further back. But I just feel like when you have a lack of success, you can't wait around. And I don't think Matthew Darche is waiting around. I think one thing that we've learned about him is, especially pulling the trigger on Peter DeBoer, is that he's going to be aggressive. And it certainly seems like he maybe wasn't aggressive in the way that people liked this season, but he didn't sit tight and say, let's just wait till the season ends and go with what we've got. So I think that bodes pretty well for seeing some changes this offseason.
Agreed. And I'm excited about Cal Ritchie, 30 points in 65 games. He was a little slow out of the gate, but that's fine, because I feel like how he progressed was such a not so much a surprise, but it was very pleasant to see that, he kind of found his footing and he moved himself up the lineup. He found himself on the power play. He had some success despite the overall lack of success on the power play, but he belonged. He looked like he belonged, and I think that's very encouraging. And yeah, I mean, we're going to get into this in a little bit, but with whatever roster decisions they have to come. But like you said about Eklund, same thing with Richie. Like, if you can give this guy the space to blossom on this team, you have to afford that room. Whether when it comes down to the cap and when it comes down to literally the amount of guys you can dress on the ice, right? Like, they have to find a way to get these guys in the lineup because, we wondered about what happened at the end there, if it was age, fatigue, whatever it is, and if that does have anything to do with it, getting these younger legs into the lineup is going to be very important.
Yeah. Matthew Schaefer showed up fully formed. He was great from day one.
Yes, he did.
Cal Ritchie got better as the season went on. He was the only player on that roster who was better down the stretch than he was at the beginning of the year. And that is, to me, super encouraging. Leaving aside the rest of the collapse, he was a much more confident guy at the end of the season. I think his play reflected it. His time on ice reflected it. And I think that's a good sign going into next year that he can continue that, keep that arrow pointed up. And, the fact that he was able to really show some improvement, even in the face of a full collapse, it was really impressive.
No doubt about it. So let's move on and talk about a little summer surgery here for the New York Islanders. And we'll start with the squad that they're taking out of this season, right? Now, you mentioned the draft. They have their own first still. They gave up the Colorado pick. They do not have a second or a third, and then they have the rest of the picks, third on down to the 7th round, whatever it is. Now, you've already alluded to it, but I mean, we're hitting a point where we might seriously have to consider a changing of the old guard, if you will, right? And that starts with conversations around Anders Lee coming back. We've talked about that before. You suggested that Matt Barzal might be the guy to trade. Not necessarily because you want to run the guy out of town,
no.
but because he may be one of the few options you have to actually make a deal when you take into consideration movement clauses and salary and all that, right? And we also discussed Adam Pelech as a guy. And I think for me, like, I'm still hesitant on the Matt Barzal talk that we had, but Adam Pelech, I think I've kind of, come to a little bit more comfort with the thought of that, because I'm a big Adam Pelech fan, but there is a lot of logic in moving him off this roster, and not because of his performance. Because listen, healthy for 82 games, he looked much more like the Adam Pelech of old, and I'll even say that about Ryan Pulock as well. And you have guys that have been on this team for a very long time. They were at one point a top pair, and they operated as such, maybe not offensively, but a great shutdown pair in their day. And this is a guy who you can potentially sell high on. And you already have, really just by default and structure of the roster, you know who the top line left side defenseman is.
Yep.
That's Matthew Schaefer. And then we have a guy in Alexander Romanov coming back. And whether you like him or not, he's probably going to be your second pair left D. And then you have that third pairing where you bring in a guy like Isaiah George, like you mentioned before, and it all makes sense, right? You have George on a lesser contract. You can get rid of Adam Pelech, $5.5, $6 million, whatever he's making there. And, he's a guy who can help you make room, not only for these younger guys on the team, but also make room in the salary structure to potentially bring in something that can help elsewhere.
Yeah, and I'll take it a step further, and Tony DeAngelo is an unrestricted free agent. Mm-hmm. There's certainly some appetite, it seems like, to bring him back. I certainly don't mind that. The impediment on the right side for me is Scott Mayfield, who I think, we talk about Carson Soucy wasn't good. We talk about Adam Boquist wasn't good. We talk about whoever else played there this season on the left side. It was kind of a revolving door of AHL guys. The common denominator was Scott Mayfield, and he did not have a good season, even though he was healthy pretty much the whole time. Right. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, his contract is pretty immovable trade-wise. Mm-hmm. That's a situation where you're thinking about a buyout. I understand you got to figure out a way to get Andre Palat probably off this roster. Mm-hmm. But Scott Mayfield, to me, as heart and soul a guy as he is, and one of the good guys that you can ever come across, and has been a great Islander for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. But that you can't have guys that are a net negative on a team that struggles to defend well. So, if that's a situation that they can make something happen there, you've obviously got Pulock, who I think we've said many times has a full no trade. He also has pretty deep roots now on Long Island, so I don't know that he's going to ever want to waive that. Right. Tony DeAngelo, a puck moving guy. Maybe he comes back. Maybe you can upgrade there in that top four. But I feel like, cost-wise and just space-wise. We talk about this a lot where you get hung up on the cap and the move clauses and this. Like, you have to loosen things up. You can't just keep putting guys in pen in the lineup when they're not performing just because they're signed for a long time and they've been here a long time. So, I think it's got to be a strictly business offseason for Matthew Darche, where he is assessing this group as harshly as he can. Yeah. A team that he is new to, but we've seen now for 5 years not have success. It's not a good team. It's too much track record to tell us that anything otherwise, to say like, oh, well, we loyalty this, loyalty that. It's a different era. So I feel like you've got that on the right side and Pelech on the left side with 3 years left, like you said, 5.75. I think he's got it's maybe a 15-team yes list, so a little bit easier to work with. And I think there's a lot of teams out there that are probably on his yes list that could see him as a really solid second pair guy on a team that could use a little bit of a boost defensively. It's not to criticize Adam Pelech at all. Like you said, he was healthy all year, which was a big plus. Yeah. He played really well at times, but this is still a team that doesn't defend very well. And so I don't I don't know that you need a shutdown guy who's known as a shutdown guy, especially where his minutes are going to be limited because, like you said, of the two younger guys that are going to take up time ahead of him. So, if they move Pelech and Mayfield, and whether it's a buyout trade for either one or both, it's some holes to fill for sure. But I think you have the makeup to really what you're getting at with that defense is changing the look. It's already Matthew Schaefer's group because of the way he played this year. Right. Now you need to sort of get away from the sacred cows, the people that you know and love, as hard as that will be, to start to really change it around and make it a little bit more forward-looking. Yeah, and could you go Schaefer, Romanov, and Pelech? I guess you could, but that's a lot of salary on the left side of your team. It is. I mean, well, it will be once Matthew Schaefer gets the blank check after next season. But yeah, it's also just minutes-wise. Like, do you need Adam Pelech to be a 15, 16-minute guy? Like I said, Carson Soucy, for a little while, maybe if he was playing with somebody else on the right side, he would have been just fine. Like that third pair, left and right side, you don't need somebody who's done the things that Adam Pelech has done. You need somebody to, whether it's somebody like Isaiah George who's kind of growing into being an NHL guy, or someone like a Carson Soucy who knows his role and is just kind of going to play 5-on-5 and a little bit of penalty kill, and you leave the rest to Matthew Schaefer. That's not really a role Adam Pelech needs to be in. Right. Yeah, agreed. So there are a lot of guys over the age of 30 on this team, as we've noted. Us too. Also true. Anders Lee, if he comes back, Kyle Palmieri, JG Pageau, Adam Pelech, Ryan Pulock, Andre Palat, Braden Shen, Casey Cizikas, D'Angelo, if he comes back. I think we're expecting Soucy not to come back. Jury's out on Riddick. I think we're probably looking to upgrade there. I'm pretty out on David Riddick. No offense. Right. So, and I don't even know if I covered them all, but that is a lot of guys over that age. And then you have other names that could or could not factor in here. Duclair, Engvall, McLean. You have actually the only RFAs in this team. Let's start there. Shabanov, Gatcomb, and Boquist. Boquist has probably played his last game as a New York Islander. Shabanov's interesting. We touched on him last episode, and we kind of agreed that you would hope that, we don't necessarily mind him being on the squad, but you'd almost hope that they bring in enough where you don't need him on the squad, right? And Gatcomb, I think, is serviceable on the fourth line if you want to bring him back. I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, you sign him for whatever you sign him for a year. It's probably going to be able to be buried fully in the AHL if it comes to that. I don't know that he's a guy necessarily get picked up on waivers, but yeah, you retain him, give him a qualifying offer. He'll still be here in case you need him. And to lump onto all those other names I rattled off, right? I brought up Duclair, I brought up Engvall, McLean, Mayfield you touched on a little bit, D'Angelo. Like, I guess the one issue here is that just, you know that they already have a crowded house before they even bring anybody new in. Right. So how is Matthew Darche going to navigate all of this? Now he was able to unload Jonathan Drouin, right, and a little bit creatively there. But he traded in a young guy in Siplikov for a much older guy in Palat. Right. And it's nice to dream about the sort of help that they could bring in this summer, but you got to move guys out, and it just looks. You look at Puckpedia, and it just looks really difficult. To add, and knowing that you have to subtract here. Yeah, and again, I'm not going to keep harping on it,
Yeah.
but that's why you talk about a guy like Matthew Barzal. There's just not a lot of movable guys. Duclair's got 2 years left, and the 3.5 is not a big number, relatively speaking, but 2 years, that's a commitment that a lot of teams are not going to want to make, no matter how much you sweeten that trade. If Peter DeBoer has a different idea about JG Pageau, well, you just sign him for 3 more years. I don't think that there's a consideration there. But if that's the sort of guy that you were thinking about, he's not just walking at the UFA and you just say like, all right, well, we loved having you here, but we're going to go in a different direction. And I got to be honest, Anders Lee was the 4th leading scorer on this team this year. This is a guy who was still, relatively speaking, pretty serviceable. Yeah. So, it's a lot of decisions to make, and I think the D. I would love to see some changes, and I think they are capable of making changes to the defense. Forward group, it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of creativity to make enough space, cap and roster wise, to really start to change some things around and make some have some impact guys there, and that to me is the one thing that they're missing. And it may not be Jordan Kyrou. We certainly talked about him an awful lot this year, and sounded like Matthew Darche talked to Doug Armstrong an awful lot about him. Didn't happen. You can certainly revisit that in the summer. Brock Besser was a guy that they talked about with Vancouver. You could certainly revisit that, though they don't have a GM right now. Right. There's certainly some other guys around the league. You look at teams that have failed. Could this be a time to make a trade with Ottawa for Long Island kid Shane Pinto? I know he mostly plays center, but maybe he's a guy you could start to make that trade. But none of these things, these are non-starters unless you're talking about a guy like Barzal. There's nobody else on this roster you can trade to get a guy like that unless you're moving him, unless you're moving tons of futures, or you're moving Keyshawn Aitchison or a couple other prospects that you probably don't want to move. So, again, I hate to keep coming back to it, but if you are going to make the sort of changes that you need to make, there's not a lot of options. So the one thing I feel like this forward group is missing is that focal point offense guy. You'd love to have a Jason Robertson, whose name's been bandied about because he doesn't have an extension. Right. You'd love to have Austin Matthews, say, who knows what's going on in Toronto.
Right.
But those are, those are pipe dreams. You see the list. You can go on Puckpedia like we do, and you see the list of free agents that are coming up in July. Yeah. It is a bad list.
It's a barren wasteland.
Yeah, unless you want to pay $11 million a year for Alex Tuck.
Right.
I don't know. So trades are really the way that you can reshape your roster these days. And if the Islanders are going to make some trades to get good guys in here, you got to give up something to get something. And like you said, they've already given up their first round pick. I guess they could trade that 13th pick plus something else.
Right.
But, I would imagine a lot of those conversations that Matthew Darche is going to have, if he says, well, Victor Eklund is off the table, and Keyshawn Aitchison off the table, and Isaiah George is off the table, and obviously Matthew Schaefer is off the table. Whoever you're talking to is like, well, what else you got?
Right. Yeah.
And you really only have a limited amount of trade assets to talk about at that point.
Well, we're going to dive deeper into that at the Snake Den. But before that, we're going to break right now. Hockey Night in New York rolls on.
Representation, it's not always easy to know where to turn. But whether you've been accused of a crime or need to go to court, Razor, Kniff & Lonstein, attorneys at law, have you covered with over 100 years of combined experience. With offices in Manhattan, Mineola, and Suffolk, Razor, Kniff & Lonstein is an award-winning law firm specializing in criminal defense with additional expertise in business debt settlement, trust and estates, personal injury, and more. At Razor, Kniff & Lonstein, you'll have direct access to your attorney 24/7. Because more attentive service translates to better outcomes. You deserve legal representatives with national recognition and a strong track record of delivering results. And Razor, Kniff & Lonstein are ready to fight for you. Call 212-LAW-1500 or go to razorandkniff.com to schedule a free, no-risk consultation today. That's RAISERANDKENNIFF.com. Razor, Kniff & Lonstein. We win cases because we make your problems our problems.
Welcome to the Snake Den with Jake the Snake Redonis.
That's right, folks. It is time for the Snake Den. But unfortunately, Jake the Snake Redonis isn't here tonight. But we have a great fellow who is going to step in his place. That's right. Even though Jake is not here, he set us up for the Snake Den. He gave us some great talking points. We're going to talk about the UFA market and the trade market for the New York Islanders. So, Edzo, stepping in for Jake the Snake.
It's
Take it away,
Copperhead Ed right now.
Copperhead Ed. Yes. I love it. Well done.
Copperhead Ed is filling in for old Jake the Snake.
So let's do it. Let's talk.
You mentioned Alex Tuch just before break.
Yes.
So we're going to start off with Alex Tuch.
What did Jake have for us today?
So we have a 29-year-old winger, a sniper, who's got 33 goals this year, reported that he was struggling to sign an extension in Buffalo based on dollar amount, wanting in the 10 million range. You said 11 million. You want to pay $11 million. But he said,
it's the Long Island tax.
Yes,
it
is.
Pay for free agents.
He said, I can't see him leaving Buffalo as a WNY kid, but if he does, Darche should do everything he can to bring in a guy who has a nose for the net. Now,
do you like his game?
I do. And shout out Baldwinsville, New York, home of my lovely wife, Elizabeth, and also Alex Tuch.
Nice.
You'd love to have him. I wouldn't love to have him for 7 years and $10.5 million. I got to be
29 years old.
He's a big dude, though. And certainly if you sign him, I think there's some other guys that you probably wouldn't sign, like Andersley. Plays a very similar game, a little bit younger. And we also kind of forgot Kyle Palmieri, another veteran guy who's going to be back from injury.
Yeah.
And I think Kyle Palmieri, not as effective, I think, as Alex Tuch or productive, but they play a very similar game.
Right.
I don't know that that's how you want to go 1-2 in your top six, is having those similar kind of power forward styles. But if you're game and all it costs is money and you got the cap space, which could, even with the cap going up this much, could be an issue for some teams. So I would imagine that if he gets the July 1, our favorite team, the Rangers, will certainly be in there pushing for him. Probably the Devils
they always
too.
are. Yeah.
I think there's just going to be a lot of suitors for him, which the Islanders don't usually win those bidding wars.
Well, hey, Arthur, if Matthew Darche could sell Peter DeBoer on coming to the Islanders, I mean, anything's possible.
That was a smaller pool of bidding teams potentially. This could be a lot of them, but yeah, you'd love to have Alex Tuch on your roster.
Yeah, for sure, and I do think there's some buyer beware with his age. The fact that if you are giving him the max length of 7 years, you're looking at 36 years old at 11 mil. That's tough, and the type of game that he plays may not age very well. Although Andersley has aged decently, as you just noted. Yeah. And I do like the fact that the UFA route could add to Matthew Barzal rather than being an exchange, because that was a concern I raised when we talked about this the first time.
You
back
do
at
have to
Bagel
replace his production, so this would be a way to add to it for sure.
Yeah, so I don't know if Tuch is the first guy I'd like, but I certainly wouldn't be upset if they got him.
Maybe $5 million and a Billy Joel meet and greet.
Yeah,
maybe that'll do it. All right, so Anthony Mantha we got up next, 29-year-old wing. He's got his revival/career year in Pittsburgh with 33 goals as well this year. Can be a solid scoring option, but he does question if after finding himself in Pittsburgh, if he only wants to resign there.
I mean, the way he's played in the playoffs, resign might be the phrase.
Yeah. I mean, yes, he's a good point.
He's been what my Daily Faceoff Tri-State Hockey Pod co-host Mike Rupp has a great line. It said, sometimes you see Anthony Mantha and sometimes you see Anthony Boytha, which is a great line from Rupper.
Nice.
So we've seen a lot of Anthony Boytha in the playoffs. I would pass. Signing guys off of career years like that, especially when they're UFA. I don't know that he's worth a big contract, and I think he's kind of had such a hot and cold career that would worry me.
I feel like that would be like reminiscent of like Andrew Ladd, like not so much in the injury sense, but just in the sense that like he comes off a 33 goal season and he comes here and he scores 16. Like I feel like that would be a one that you have remorse over relatively quickly. Sure. I think for me, I say pass.
Come on, Jake, do better than this.
Jake's got a lot of 29 going on 30s or 30s going on
30s.
So,
that's where we're at.
So next up, we have Mason Marchment. You mentioned him before the show. 30-year-old wing, an Islanders villain from last season.
Yeah.
Yes.
He put together a 45-point campaign in just 68 games. Plays with an edge and a solid two-way game to help make opponents' lives hell. An undrafted guy who has spent his career bouncing around, could be a 1 to 2 year stopgap guy while you wait for Yzerman to continue his development.
Mason Marchment, he adds a lot to your middle six, but I feel like he's not the guy that's going to push your veterans that you're keeping down to the right spots in the lineup. Mm-hmm. I think he's a slightly younger version of Anders and Palmieri and Duclair and those guys that we're trying to either find spots for or find spots elsewhere for. So yeah, I mean, if he's only looking at a 1-year deal when he gets to UFA, like given the very thin crop of UFA forwards, I can imagine he might strike it rich a little bit in terms getting like maybe a 3-year deal. But if you could get him cheap, then maybe. But I sort of feel like whatever deal he gets, you're going to look at it like that Anthony Duclair 4-year deal. Like in a couple of years, this one is going to look so good.
Yeah, I'm with you. And like, listen, I like a guy who with a little bit of an edge, and it'd be nice to have him not gunning for Matthew Schaefer, right?
Defending Matthew Schaefer instead of trying to kill him.
Right, yeah, sure. that would be better. However, I'm with you in the sense that, like, with the minimal amount of space that they have in the cap and the minimal amount of roster spots, I don't think he's the guy you want to, fill that up with. Yeah.
Our first defenseman on the list is Rasmus Andersson, not Dahlin. He's still playing hockey.
Also not available, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Solid puck-moving D-man who is versatile on both ends of the ice. Eats pucks for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Wow. Where does Jake come up with this copy?
Jake, you need to write into me more.
Did you write this, Ed?
No, I did not. I'm not editing this.
Oh, you have more.
There was more. Jake's not done.
Go on. Oh, please.
Yeah, he's having a fourth meal. It's don't have time to break the bank for him and could help fill a void on the right if you move on from a Scott Mayfield.
Yeah, I don't know if those are comparable.
No
players.
No.
I mean, yes, I would love to have Rasmus Anderson play alongside Matthew Schaefer for the next few years.
Yeah.
However, you're looking at probably 7 years and $10 million for Rasmus Anderson. Maybe not that much.
Yeah.
But it's at least 9.
I'd say 8 to 9.
He's the top guy available if he gets there. Vegas doesn't usually make trades like that and then let guys walk. So I would imagine that he'll end up staying in Vegas. But if he doesn't, I'm not, if he was a lefty and was a guy who could play a little bit further down, maybe. I just sort of feel like if you're getting Anderson, that means you got to move Ryan Pulock in addition to Scott Mayfield, and I just don't know how they do that.
Yeah, that's the issue, right? Because I would love to see Rasmus Anderson on the New York Islanders. I think he would be great. I think, just like you said, he'd look good on Schaefer's right side. A nice little veteran there, a guy who can play well with him. But the real question is how do they make that happen?
Yeah.
And that's my concern. But have at it, Darche. Let's see what we can do.
Darren Radish, who is our next guy, he came up in chat quite a bit tonight, so curious with your thoughts on this. A 30-year-old right-shot defenseman, career year on a minimum contract for Tampa Bay. Nearly a point per game when it felt like his career was on the ropes. Showed offensive prowess this year, but can hold steady on the back end. I personally don't foresee him leaving Tampa Bay, but he should cash in on a decent payday.
A lot of predictions from Jake on this one.
There's more.
He's thorough.
Yeah, not quite similar to Anthony Mantha, because I feel like Darren Radish, he looks the part. He's got that big slapper, plays with an edge, guy who was I think he was in the Rangers organization in Hartford for a couple of years and never got a sniff anywhere until the last couple of years. In Tampa, we know what they do. They work magic with their guys that come up from the AHL. It's the envy of every other team in the league, that what they're able to do to turn guys that you never heard of or never had a sniff like Radish into not just viable NHL players, but guys that are having 24 goal seasons like he's having. So to me, I agree with Jake that Radish would be wise to try to figure something out in Tampa where he seems to fit really well rather than go for the big payday. But he is 30 years old and he's never really had a long-term deal. I would steer clear. I don't think that he fits well if you have Ryan Pulock still on your team, and even if you have Tony DeAngelo there, I just don't know if he's what you need. You already have a power play quarterback in Matthew Schaefer. He's a guy who's gotten a lot of points being the power play quarterback in Tampa with Victor Hedman kind of in and out of the lineup this year. So intriguing option, but not really what he's going to be looking for, and not really, I think, a perfect fit for them.
I think you've sold me on the argument against bringing him in, so I'm fine with that.
Bobby McCann is next. 29-year-old forward, 10 goals in 18 games after being dealt to Seattle. Plays a power forward type role with physicality and can contribute offensively. He's due for a raise, but out of the rest of these guys, he should be the cheapest.
I got a lot of time for Bobby McMahon, honestly.
Yeah?
I think another guy like Darren Radish, who's kind of broken out after being undrafted, kind of, a little bit older at 28, 29. But he does play with a really high motor, and he's got some skill. I feel like, again, you have to strip away a few guys, but he is, to me, one guy that you could put in the top 6 on this Islanders team on the left side, and you say, okay, he can be ahead of Braden Shen. He can put, if Emil Heineman outplays him or Simon Holmstrom outplays him, fine. He's your second line wing. If you can get him on a decent deal, which again, who knows what the numbers are going to look like when these guys get to July 1,
right?
Because there's so few of them. But if you were to get him for 3 years and somewhere between $4 and $5 million, even $5 million if you had the space, I got some time for him.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And again, like it's just you think about where these guys might slot, and also if they only have so much room to work with to bring somebody in, like. And not that the Islanders have had great success with this, but like I feel like they have to bring in a game breaker, like a guy, like it doesn't have to be Austin Matthews, but there's somebody who can.
I'm glad you said that. Doesn't have to be one of the 3 best players in the league.
We're getting to him.
My point is that I think we've seen enough of this team trying to win with.
By committee, yeah.
And the bare minimum of offensive weapons. And that's not to take away from the guys like Barzal and Horvat that we've talked about, but like I think they finally just need another dude of that, ilk to roll with them, and if you're so limited with the guys you can bring in, I just feel like that's who I would want to reserve that slot for and that money for. And Ed, how many guys do you have left on the UFA here?
That's the last one.
Perfect. All right.
Now we're moving on to trades.
All right, let's move on to trades, but let's group some names together. Let's why don't you rattle off some names here together, and then we'll go.
Well, we got Jordan Kyrou.
Okay.
We got Robert Thomas.
Okay.
Maybe you can get Santana with him.
Hey, there we go.
How about that? Alex DeBrincat and Austin Matthews.
Okay.
That's a good group.
Yeah.
I got a lot of time for Alex DeBrincat. I don't know how you're going to get him out of Detroit. They seem like they're...
Yeah, he's a hometown boy.
I know. They're desperate to try to get over the hump here, too. So Steve Yzerman doesn't seem like he's going anywhere. I don't think they're trading Alex DeBrincat. Maybe if they got Matthew Barzal, but that would be kind of a weird one.
Right.
And those other guys, Robert Thomas, that's a guy who's a center, who's got a pretty versatile game. If you're talking about a Matthew Barzal trade...
That's the one.
Those are the main pieces that I could see being a pretty decent match because he is a center, he is a scorer, he is a playmaker, he does a lot of different things. He's been a number 1 center. He could be on a team with Bo Horvat where they're 1 and 2. Could help a power play. He's a little bit more predictable style player than Matthew Barzal. So yeah, I could see that one happening. Austin Matthews, I feel like there's probably about a 0.5% chance that he would want to be traded and want to come because he's got a full no move and want to come to the Islanders. I feel like if Austin Matthews is getting traded, he's going back home to California area.
Yeah,
so.
I'm not necessarily convinced that he doesn't want to be traded from Toronto. With everything going on
I totally agree with that.
Right. I just don't know if the island is where he ends up.
Yeah. Maybe he loves Matthew Schaefer just like the rest of us. You never know.
You never know. And Cairo, we've talked about him a lot already on the show.
We can move past that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, he stresses you have to revisit this. That's the first sentence of his little note here. You have to revisit it.
This is tougher talk than we ever get when he's here.
Well, keyboard warriors and all that.
But up to you.
Yeah, I just don't know.
Call.
I mean, he's got points after that. After he says that, apparently.
That's okay. We know all about it.
Poor guy's not here to defend himself.
I would love to revisit the Jordan Kyrou trade too. I just don't know what you're giving up to get him. I mean, that to me, you're probably not. You want him playing with Barzal. You don't want to trade Barzal for him. So I think then you're looking at.
It doesn't look like Jake knows either because there's no names in this.
That's okay.
I would say that's where you probably have to give up Keyshawn Aitchison. You're going to have to bite the bullet and give up one of your plus prospects to do that. So that would be a tough, just in season when you had that Colorado first, if you could make that work, that's one thing. But now that pick is gone, unless you're trading one of your best prospects, you're trading your 2027 first in all likelihood. So it's a big commitment to get that guy.
The real issue here, Arthur, is that the surprise of this season before it went south really muddied the waters for this team, because I think going in, as we all kind of thought, that it was going to be a lean year for this team, and they were going to try to grow the team and eventually have some contracts come off the books, maybe trade Pajot and Lee this trade deadline if things didn't go right, and then they would have had more assets, they would have had more cap space, but then they went and won a bunch of games. Then
Bastards.
Yeah, right. Then they made it fun for a good amount of time because it was fun. And then it just like it perfectly went the wrong way. Like the perfect storm of like they were good enough at the right time to add at the deadline, to bring in salary, to bring in guy with age, and then they fall off the cliff. And now they're in this conundrum now of adding to a team that ultimately shouldn't have been added to. We didn't have the foresight for that. And it just puts Darche and the Islanders in such a bigger pickle than they really needed to be this summer, and that's what's going to make all of this so difficult. So you can rattle off all these names and say it'd be nice to bring these guys in, because now like they're in this like, okay, I guess we're trying to win now a little more than we thought.
Yep.
Right. And where they would have had that year or two grace period of letting this team build with a young Schaefer. You remember he was only going to get 9 games this year.
I mean, we all,
right.
The GM said it wasn't just us.
Right. But the point is like things like just. They fast forwarded too quickly, and then just it went. Then the tape started rolling off the VHS. You know what I mean?
Old school reference.
And now they're in this really tough spot, and I'm so curious to see what Darche can do with it. But I do want to find out what the audience has to say.
Yeah,
so
we got to get
to
Jake,
we got to get to questions. Yes, great job in the Snake Den. That will do it for the Snake Den. We'll see what the Islanders can do. I'm going to tell you guys about Isles Fix, and then we'll take it to questions, Bruins. So, Islanders country, get your daily fix of Isles news, highlights, and analysis by subscribing to Isles Fix, the Monday through Friday Islanders newsletter sent directly to your inbox. Sign up for free or become a paid subscriber for added benefits at islesfix.substack.com. And now we go to questions, Bruin.
It's time for Questions Brewing. So go ahead, ask us a question.
Let's go.
Ed, welcome back.
Finally, that Snake Den guy is
now
out
it's
of
really
here.
Ed.
Now,
Yes.
Jesus.
Not
Who
fake
is
Jake,
that guy?
Not Copperhead.
All right, we're going in quick, and I think I'm going to eeny, meeny, miny, mo some of these, depending on...
Okay. So
right.
pick some good
So
ones,
Chris
man.
from Long Island. We'll start with Chris from Long
All
Island.
right.
Sure.
He says, what is the % chance Eklund makes the opening night lineup? What about George? Arthur, were you a fan of the band The Call?
I was. Are they
He
still
loves
around?
to check you on your music.
He does.
I
He
do.
does. He's
Yeah, I
pulling
like
out
how he
some-
sneaks that at the end of his questions.
He's pulling out some deep cuts. Eklund, I'll say 60% chance he makes the roster. And George, I'll go 35 because there's no spot for him at the moment.
Okay, fair enough. We'll see. Maybe later in the summer that percentage changes.
Sure.
But that's fair. I'm actually a little surprised you gave Eklund 60. I was thinking more like 45.
I think on this team, if you don't make a lot of changes up front, you got to find room for him. You got to force some youth into this group if it's going to stay pretty similar.
Okay, Ed.
DTMR, he says, has a missing persons report gone out for Engvall? Haven't heard his name mentioned as a player.
He was in the team photo.
We need to do something with him for the next 5 years.
I mean,
Is it that long?
I think it's only 4 now.
Oh, okay.
We talk about how immovable some of these contracts are. None is more immovable than that $3 million per year. But to be fair,
if only we had Lou on the show to ask him why.
If he's healthy, maybe there's a chance we could see the trade year Engvall again, where he earned himself that contract. And maybe now a full year away, he's healthy. Maybe the motor is, things are churning in his mind. It's a lot of ifs.
You are struggling through this one.
But yeah, I mean, we forget about Kyle Palmieri, who's actually been a decent contributor.
Yeah.
It's easy to forget about Pierre Engvall, but I guess once you get a look at Puck PD, everyone goes, oh God, Pierre Engvall. So he'll be here in September for sure.
So he's alive. Okay.
Yes.
Big time 1972. He said, why do so many average players in the NHL have an NTC or MNTC? They really need that to close Mayfield on a 7-year deal. Comparing to MLB, the Dodgers only Ohtani has an NTC.
Well, that's very different. And
Yeah,
I can't speak to that.
baseball's harder to compare. It has become an epidemic. I think we see this a lot in the NHL, where they end up changing the rules when the CBA comes, because the agents are smarter than the owners and the GMs. The agents are the ones that are always kind of gaming out whatever advantage they can get for their clients. And owners and GMs, owners down to GMs and GMs then to make these deals, feel like you need to be able to give an edge. And certainly Islanders have a few, I think even just the term on most of these deals, forget the trade conditions. It's usually the term.
Right.
And we look at teams like Jersey, like Tom Fitzgerald lost his job in Jersey because he had gave out too many no trade clauses. It's
Right.
Maybe it'll start to turn a little bit more. I think, to be honest, given the environment, and we you know what, we're not just giving Lou some credit because you joined us last week, but I think leaving the door open with some of these guys like Pelech, like Barzal, where you didn't give the full no move, maybe there's a chance to kind of shake things up a little bit with some of these guys, and that's because he didn't fully commit.
You know who didn't give out a lot of those, at least from what I recall, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but Garth Snow, I feel like
It was
gave out none of them.
It was a different environment. Like now you look at a lot of, like, it's hard not to give them out because there's so many everywhere. Like, and you know, like our questioner said, it's not guys that you'd expect. It's
Right.
guys, you know, like Andre Palat getting a full no move to go to Jersey. I understand.
Thanks, Tom Fitzgerald.
I understand the pedigree, but he's never been the kind of performer where you say, like, well, we can't let this guy go ever.
Right.
So it's interesting.
Okay.
Walter Barker asks, has
Big
Simon Holmstrom plateaued? Can he get to another level?
Oh, I think he's got another level.
I agree.
I think a guy like Peter DeBoer could help him get to that next level, because Peter DeBoer, you look at some of the guys that have excelled on his watch, you know, in recent years. I think, you know, even when you go all the way back to his days in Florida, like Alexander Barkov was just starting out then. You know, you look at his teams in Dallas. You know, Rupe Hintz is a guy who really blossomed under him, and that's a guy that I think is a really good comparable for Simon Holmstrom. Hintz, who was known almost exclusively as a two-way shorthanded guy who turned into a 30-plus goal scorer. Some of the guys in Vegas that really turned into good two-way players. Simon Holmstrom has a really good foundation to build off now, and now he's got a coach who coaches elite two-way players. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do, and I think if Simon Holmstrom can earn his way, and really what held him back a lot this year was kind of a slow start to the season. If he can get that out of his system, come out of the gate the way that we've seen him play in the middle of seasons, he's a 30-goal guy for sure.
I like the sound of that. I think that would
be
great.
They need it.
That is definitely the truth. But yeah, I think he has more of a ceiling for sure.
Yeah. I found Mr. Thomas Boyle.
Hey,
TV!
He says, who has the best chance to make the team out of training camp this fall?
Anybody higher than 60%?
Ilya Sorokin.
He will make the team.
Yes, Matthew Schaefer.
I assume he means probably the younger guys, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, probably Eklund, just looking at the landscape right now. But yeah, if they make some trades on defense, I would imagine it'll be Isaiah George.
Those are your two top candidates.
Sorry to be redundant, but yeah.
Magician Matt, he said, thoughts on the DeRoche canning and what happens with Ray Bennett and Bob Boner?
Bugner?
It's Boner. It's like donut.
I know it's Boner
like
to you, but
it's Boner.
Bob Bugner has worked with Peter DeBoer before, so I think he's sticking around. Ray Bennett, I'm not really sure what the connection is there. I don't know if DeBoer has somebody else in mind. And DeRosier is gone because he was Patrick Roy's guy. Like everybody has their guys that they bring in, and he doesn't really have like a long resume that he's, you know, he only worked with him in the QMJHL. Right. So young guy, hopefully he'll get another chance coaching in the league. But yeah, you bring in your guys, they usually go with you too. Yeah,
I have a feeling that Bennett will be replaced as well. But we'll see.
He's been around the league a long time. You never know.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, now you're blaming him for the power play.
Whoa, Arthur. No. It came from the simple fact that you literally just said these coaches have their own guys. And I think Mr. DeBoer probably has his own guy.
Well, you know, it's funny. Steve Spott has been kind of DeBoer's guy all the way through many of his stops. And he, I believe, is an assistant in Boston with Marco Sturm right now and just got hired. So I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Jeremy Ford, he says, do you see one of Schaefer, Romanov, George, or Aegison, Velo, is that how you say his name? Veilleux, yeah, Veilleux, being a stretch, being able to play the right side to make Pollock movable down the road? For sure, Pelech has to be moved.
Yeah, Schaefer could play the right side. He can play anywhere. He could play center if he needed to.
That's probably true.
Probably could play
Don't
net.
want him there.
Could probably be the backup goalie if we needed it.
Yeah, he could be coach.
Yeah, I think we saw Schaefer play on his offside.
We did
just fine this season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know about the rest of those guys, especially the amateur guys right now. But again, I'm just going to reiterate: Ryan Pollock married a Long Island girl. They have a
Right.
kid.
Mm-hmm.
He is settled here. He is not waiving that no trade clause for any reason at all.
So then there you have it. Ed.
Jonathan Doe, he says, how big of a role do you think Matt Martin has with player personnel? It seemed puzzling that he appeared to be Darche's right hand guy in the Shen trade promo video. Great show.
I don't necessarily. I mean, I don't know if it's a bad thing if he is a right hand man for Matthew Darche, but I don't think that video necessarily indicates that he is, right. So and how much involvement he has in personnel. I mean, I'll just say this: I think he's a good guy to have around.
Yeah. I think when you have a guy like that, you think about there's other guys like that. Jets have Jason Spezza got into management.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's a full AGM with Kyle Dubas in Pittsburgh. Shane Doan was doing that in Toronto. I think when you have a recent former player, that's the situation that you want him. He knows Braden Shen.
He's a bridge.
Probably fought in the NHL. Like that's the guy you've got a lot of respect for.
Yeah.
If you're bringing him into that meeting, Braden Shen will say like, "Oh yeah, I know that guy. Like I've stood across from that guy on the ice a million times. Maybe we've talked a little bit." So, and that doesn't mean he's kind of like filling a ceremonial role. Like Matt Martin is learning the job. It's why he's there. And when you think about the other AGMs, whether it's Chris Lamoriello or Ryan Bonus, they have other responsibilities. They're scouting. They're out with the AHL team. They're doing these other things, cap stuff with Steve Pellegrini. So special assistant, that former player, you are the right-hand man. You're the guy there. If Matthew Darche says, like, what's that guy like? We're thinking about trading for Braden Shen. Do you know anybody who knows him? That's what that role is. So you are available to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think he's a good guy to have in the room.
Another one from Chris from Long Island. He says, will Ken Morrow represent the Isles at the lottery?
He damn well better for now until the end of time.
That's absolutely right.
In addition to being one of the all-time good guys, he's the lucky charm now.
There you go.
One
One
of the
more, Ed.
all-time good guys. We'll do another one from Jeremy Ford. I'm sure somewhere along the line we've answered this question in some way or another during the show. He says, looking at the landscape of the NHL and playoff hockey, what are the key ingredients the Isles need going forward, I guess he meant to say.
Well, I mean, they got the goalie.
Well, they need another goalie.
Yes.
They need another goalie.
They need another goalie.
And they just need to play faster. Like you look at the way some of these teams are whipping the puck around, whether it's Buffalo, younger teams, Buffalo, Montreal, even Carolina. I understand that series with Ottawa looked very familiar to Islanders fans. Even Philly. Philly's a team that couldn't score goals at all during the regular season. And the way that they are playing counterattacking, their D is so good, preventing chances off the rush. And Pittsburgh is really a team that lives off the rush offense-wise. Just have no answers for a team. When you are built that way, the goaltending's been really good. But counterattack. You think back to that first game of that series where Philly had, 5 or 6 breakaways? If you are a team that can play that way, play fast, turn the puck over, get up the ice quickly, and I understand that's what the Islanders have been trying to do for a lot of years. You've got to get the guys that can do it, though. And I think as they get younger...
Real quick from Johnny Sain, he just came in and he says, where do we look for the second goalie?
Well, if Jake had given us some options, damn it.
Right. Come on, Jake.
Free agent. You find a guy for $1.5 million and bring him in, and he knows his role. I mean, Riddick would have been great. And if they look around and they end up finding nothing and they have to re-sign him, I'm 100% against it. But I understand the way the market is what the market is. It's a pretty small pool of guys that you can rely on, and it's kind of a unique situation. They might need somebody to play 30 games. That's almost kind of like a 1B scenario. So maybe he'll get creative. Maybe he'll find a younger guy. There's a guy who's the third goalie in Jersey who's an RFA, and Nico Dawes, who's come up and had some good run, a bit of a good run. I don't know if you can commit to a number 2 like that, but with the Varlamov situation, maybe that's the route you go, where you've got a guy who's not quite ready, but maybe could be halfway through the season. So yeah, it's a tough one for me. You really just want to find a guy, and if it clicks, it's great. Like, that's why a guy like Thomas Greiss, when they brought him in a decade ago, really made a huge difference. He ended up being the number 1 guy, but he came in as a career backup, and had not had a lot of games in San Jose. They identified him as a great job by Garth Snow and his staff to find that guy. and commit to him. And, he's whatever, third or fourth all time in wins for this franchise.
Yeah, and for a time, it looked like Riddick could have been the next coming of that. And then, unfortunately, it went
Didn't
south.
work out.
It did not, so we shall see. But we got to wrap this thing up.
I know,
we
this
have
is a
covered
jam-packed one.
a lot of bases. So that will do it for Questions Brewing. And that will do it for Hockey Night in New York. So I want to start by sending a huge, huge thanks to all you wonderful people out there who watch and listen to this show. It is much appreciated. We appreciate it here. So thank you so much for sticking with us through the entire season and the seasons in the past. Also want to send a big thanks to Razor Kniff and Launstein, attorneys at law. Nobody likes going to court, but if you have to, call 212-LAW 1500 for a free consultation. And a huge thanks once again to them for sticking with us all season. Love those guys. They are great. And a huge thanks to the crew here at Hockey Night in New York. Edzo, Sleepy J,
Let's get Jay
and
on the mic.
Jake the Snake,
Jay on the
who
mic.
isn't here. And a huge, huge thanks to this man right here, Mr. Arthur Staple. Been an absolute pleasure doing the show with you this season. Appreciate everything you brought to the show. It has been a ton of fun.
Yeah, this was awesome. I really, really enjoyed it. Nice new way to connect with all the Islander fans that I've known for many years, and some new ones as well. And for the most part, it was a fun season. We certainly had fun here.
Yes.
I'm sorry it ended the way that it did, but there's a lot of hope now, which is good. And John, I appreciate you, man. This was so much fun. When you came calling this summer, I was like, what am I going to do? This was it. This was a blast.
Let's go. Good stuff. And Arthur, you're still doing the Tri-State, right? So
We are.
Where can we find you?
Not a whole lot else to talk about, but Daily Face-Off, Tri-State Hockey Pod, Stape NHL on Twitter, Art Stape on Blue Sky, and watching some hockey playoffs and feeling like the Islanders could have done a little damage if they just held it together.
What could have been?
Longer.
What could have been? You can follow myself at Shawnee Hockey on Twitter and Blue Sky. You can follow the show on all social media platforms at Hockey Night NY. You can check out the website at HockeyNightNY.com. You can also follow our missing Jake the Snake Radonis at Jake Radonis on Twitter. So, folks, we're going to go quiet here for a little bit unless there's some shocking news that we didn't foresee. But we will probably go dark until around the draft and free agency. So, until then, enjoy the playoffs. Enjoy your summer. Once again, we really appreciate you guys. So, for Arthur Staple, for Edzo, for Jake the Snake, for Sleepy J. Belsky, I've been Sean Cuthbert. We've been Hockey Night in New York. Have a great rest of your Sunday night.